Before starting today's exercise, you'll want to install .NET 5.0 and Visual Studio 2019. Community Edition is fine. In this exercise, we'll once again be playing with C#, and we'll do so by creating a WebAPI application. To start, we're going to want to set up our environment. That means, in this case, creating a directory to play in. Continuing on past trends, I'll just put it in a non-zero days directory, and today I'll be using .NET C# Web API. Next, we'll open up Visual Studio 2019. All right, so now we've got Visual Studio 2019 open. Go ahead and create a new project. In this, we're going to be selecting ASP.NET Core Web Application. You don't readily see it, could be in your quick or your selection here. You can search in the search control up here, and that'll allow you to search for that. Since we've got it here, we'll just go ahead and click Next. Now in this, we're going to be naming it. We selected our name earlier to be .NET C# Web API. Up to you if you want to place the solution of the project in the same directory. I'm going to go ahead and click that box. And click Create. From this, it's really important that we make sure we choose .NET 5.0. That's what we'll be covering in this exercise, so that's what we want to make sure we're selecting. And for the specific template, we're going to be creating a web API. It's worth exploring each of these, but this is what we're covering today. On the side, I am configuring for HTTPS, and I'll be enabling OpenAPI support. We'll cover a little bit of what OpenAPI is today as well. And then I'll click Create. All right, so that gave us quite a bit of code. Let's take a look at what we've got here. We've got a class, the weather forecast class. This is just a plain old class object, a POCO. It's got the program itself has an entry point here, which is program. You see the main method, which calls into create, which calls into startup. In startup, we're going to set up, via this template, our dependency injection. If you're not sure what that is, I'll provide a link in the description below. You can go ahead and read more on dependency injection. It sets up something called Swagger. We'll read up on that. That's what OpenAPI did. Then we've got some development settings, HTTPS, routing, authorization. This is just sort of like the default what's built in, what's offered by .NET for a web API. And then exposed is a single controller endpoint. This is a get endpoint, which returns some randomized array of weather forecast objects. You see it's randomly generating some output there. So if somebody makes a get call to an endpoint named based off the name of the controller, it's going to generate some weather forecast entities and output that. You'll note up above, we've got this green triangle. For now, it's selected as IIS Express. I want to change that, though. I want it to be the .NET C# Web API. Then we're going to go ahead and press that and just see what the generated output actually gives us. See that output. You'll note over here, it's telling us some information, just debugging informational stuff. It says go to this URL. Well, it also happened to open up that URL. I'll drag that over. And we see this is what OpenAPI gave us. This is a service discoverability tool. So we're just learning more and given a tool by which to let anybody else learn more about what our endpoints actually offer and how to use them. So in this case, we can click here, see weather forecast, we can try it out, execute, and in fact, we get this output. And if somebody were to call via the HTTP get call to this endpoint here, they would be able to get exactly something like this. In this case, it's randomly generated, so it'd be slightly different, but that's what we're going for. All right, let's stop debugging. And let's add our own endpoint. We'll note over here we have to press any key to close it, or we can just close the window. To create our own endpoint, we'll start over here at the controllers folder, and we can right-click, add, new item. Within this pop-up, we want to search for an API controller that is empty. We'll do that. We're going to create our own name here. We're going to make it a non-zero controller. Very topical. There we go. So here's our new controller. Very verbose, so much in it. You'll note the route is pre-populated. Doesn't have anything else really other than the fact that it's a controller built in. But we're going to go ahead and add a new method to that. We're going to create public. We'll make it return string. And it's going to be a non-zero message, in which we just return a string congrats on your non-zero day. Now, in order to take our method and turn it into an endpoint, we want to decorate this with both the HTTP verb that's in use, in this case a get call, and also a route. So in this case, I want to say that it'll be the message of the day endpoint. Now, if we were to start debugging this again, we should see there's a non-zero category, that's the controller level, under which there's this combined route, both the controller's default route and the endpoint's route, message of the day. And if I try it out, congrats on your non-zero day. Days. Let's go ahead and close out of that. Now let's set the requirement that we be able to change the message of the day without having to recompile our code. To do that, I want to add a new class that can track that message of the day and allow manipulation of that tracked value. So let's start by adding that class. New item, class. We're going to set that as message repository. That'll be the name of that. Again, we're just adding that at the project level, new class, message repository. Here we go. For this class, we're going to want to have two major methods, just a get message and set message. So let's set that up. Get message and a set message. Set message is going to take an input string that's going to somehow become our message of the day. Because the context in which this is going to be called is going to be asynchronous by nature of it being a web API, we'll want to store this not as a string, but instead in a concurrent safe class, such as a concurrent dictionary. So that's what I'm going to do here. Since I didn't grab that, I'm going to control period and make sure that we're using the collections concurrent library. It gets added up here. Now in here, we'll go ahead and set the methodology to retrieve that key, the message of the day key, and then down below we'll set some code to be able to set that key. And here we have it. We have our dictionary figuring out, do we have a message of the day key? If so, return that value that's associated with that key. Otherwise, there was no message of the day entered yet. For set, we're just setting a value for that key and then returning it. I'm going to want to only expose this via its interface. We haven't implemented that yet, but luckily Visual Studio has a neat tool for that. Let's explore that next. We right-click Message Repository, go to Quick Actions and Refactorings, and then Extract Interface. We should be able to select everything that we care about here. By default, it's done exactly that. We can just hit OK. Now we have an interface. We F12 into that. It exposes just the message get and set. Before we're ready to use this, we have to set up dependency injection. So let's go back to startup. Let's have it so that the web API by default is controlling the lifetime of our new repository. We'll do that here in configure services. With this line of code here, we're telling our program that if a controller requests an iMessage repository, that they will be given a new instance of message repository. However, there's an added note here. The fact that this is add singleton means that that would be the same instance of message repository against all controllers for the scope or lifetime of this application running. So long as this application is running, it'll continue to be the same instance of a message repository. There's other things that you can do here, like add transient or scoped. Because we're using singleton, we'll be able to maintain the same instance of repository and thus the same instance of a dictionary. Let's head back over to our controller. And let's set it up so that it requests that iMessage repository in a constructor. And then after that, let's set it so that our message of the day endpoint is utilizing the message of the day. We've got our constructor set up. It's taking in a message repository instance. If it doesn't receive it, it's gonna have an exception thrown. But if it does, it'll just store it to this local variable. Now we can use that and replace the code here to be able to just call into that repository and get the message that's set. Since there's no way to set the message yet, we should just be seeing that there was no message set yet. Go ahead and hit F5, debug into this, and make sure that we are in fact getting the expected message. And you'll see no message of the day. And close out of that, stop debugging. And next, we can create a method where we will be able to put a message into that repository. To do that, we're going to create a new method. It's going to be a set message of the day, taking in an input string, and we'll also return what the message ends up being set to. In this case, that's the output of the repository set message call. Forwarding along our inputs, and there we go. Now we'll also need to decorate this with the same sort of attribute pattern up above. We can do that with HTTP. In this case, I'm going to use put. Some developers will put post here instead in HTTP post. I think for my purposes, I'm going to stick with the specification, the HTTP specification, which indicates a put would be fine here. But my main advice would just be to be pragmatic and thus consistent within your own applications as to what a put or a post means. Further, we need a route. Now I'm also going to use the message of the day route here. Because it's a different verb, we can overlap on that. After that, we can go ahead and debug it and see what it does. We open up put and get. We should see try it out does no message of the day entered, what we expected. Down below, we can try it out and we can say bunny. Bunnies are cute. Hey, bunny will be the message of the day. Good. Execute up here again. We receive bunny. We can change that, make sure that still works. This time it's singular, not plural. Hey, above. And with that, congrats on your non-zero day, right? All right, today we created a web API in .NET 5.0, written in C#. Created a put endpoint, a get endpoint, learned a little bit about Visual Studio 2019's tooling, and also a little bit of dependency injection. If you have some extra time today, I'd suggest reading a little bit more on dependency injection, particularly in .NET and its implementations. Potentially also the solid principles, or just playing around more in this project. You might check out the links in the description below. There's some additional reading suggestions there. But if you don't have any additional time beyond what you've had here, Congrats on a non-zero day.